Eddie, in your magisterial work, Unfolding Consciousness, 4 volumes, you build that on the foundation of a different way of thinking than the normal materialistic thinking, based on your foundations in perennial philosophy, theosophy, and a way of trying to get interconnections between neuroscience and a so-called bigger vision. How does that work?
Robert, I think it's very important to see the context in which we're asking the question. Neuroscience is indispensable when we're dealing with the material principle, the brain. But the animating principle behind the brain, no amount of physical instrumentation is going to cut a window into the inner person, into the soul. So to forge these interfaces is very vital, and I think Ian McGilchrist has done us a tremendous honor and service in his 2 books, The Master and His Emissary, and the latest one, The Matter with Things. Body, soul, and spirit are the 3 modes of our consciousness on Earth. Whenever a higher principle touches a so-called lower one, there is an interface which we call soul. Now, just as the chief executive of a company can't get down on the shop floor and manipulate the machinery, he needs middle management to interface between him and the shop floor. So the workers are taking the vision of the chief executive and creating matter and material out of it. So the spiritual nature can't just jump into the body. It needs an interface, which is known as soul. And the best analogy I can give you is the electricity from a power station to the domestic consumer. If all the power in the power station in Italy were into that light bulb, it would blow it up. You need an interface. Transformers. Souls are transformers. So you have the spiritual soul that transforms the atomic light, the spark, 1 step down. You have the human soul, another transformer that is responsible for, let's call it, the light of the mind. And you have the animal soul, which is our material principle and body. And talking of soul, if I can just quickly quote Plato, that he said the soul psyche, in the generic sense, can either rise and ally itself to nous, the spiritual soul, in which case all will be well, or the soul, generic, can descend and attach itself to anoia, which is the irrational self, in which case problems arise. And the reason I mentioned Ian McGilchrist is that this relation between the higher mind, nous, and the desire-driven mind, anoia, has a very strong correlation between the right brain and the left brain. That's how I see the interconnection.
Now, between the spirit, the soul, and the body there would be the brain. I know what the brain is, but what is literally the soul? You mean it more than metaphor.
You certainly do.
It must be something there. Is it a substance?
Yes, it is a substance, but not a physical substance, which doesn't sound as though I'm answering the question. Right. Part of the occult teachings is really to go into the mechanisms. So we had the body, of course, then the model body is known as the linga sharira, the doppelganger. The soul is that unit of the personal soul, of the lower mind and the desire principle. The spiritual soul is the higher mind and the intuitional principle. So I would say there are entities on a higher dimension, literally. And I think Bernard Carr's work on higher dimensions has a lot to offer on this. So there are substances, but not,
So you had the animal soul, which is the body or the brain, and then
which informs the body and brain. Yeah, yeah.
and then the human soul, and then the higher
The spiritual soul.
spiritual soul. Is there anything above that?
Atma,
Oh, okay.
your deepest. But it's not right to say Atma is in me. I mean, these are just, it's not a location. You're not talking a volumetric, in the sense of our deepest center. So these relate very closely to the three main consciousness centers in the human body. Robert, the great English Platonist, said there's light in the sun, there are the rays of the light, and the splendor communicated by the light. That relates to the heart, the brain, the generative system. The heart is the superior center, the source of life. The brain is the center of greatest physical dignity, and the generative system is the center of least physical dignity, but the greatest physical importance. So the heart is the source of life. The brain is the link between the superior and the infernal center, so to speak. It is a link that unites life and form. And the generative center is the center of power in each person. The initiate has everything in balance. The intellectualist obviously has the intellectual center, and the materialist, well, you know where he operates. But he needs to for what he's doing. When he gets out of control, we have great problems.